I couldn't process what I was seeing. And honestly, I might not have believed a single word of it if it hadn't been my own daughter standing right there in front of me, shaking, her voice breaking apart, tears sliding down her face as if they'd been holding back for years and finally got the go-ahead to fall. She looked like someone who'd sprinted away from a nightmare only to have it catch her anyway. Karen had completely lost it, and the worst part was, none of this even shocked me anymore. It was almost like fate had finally decided to reveal exactly how far that woman was capable of going. Before we get into it, drop a comment telling us what country or city you're tuning in from. We'd love to see how far this one travels. Karen had always been like this. Loud, controlling, and drunk on authority that existed only in her own head, as if she'd been raised on a steady diet of HOA power trips since childhood. She marched through the neighborhood like a broken traffic signal, constantly flashing, constantly confused, and constantly stirring up trouble. My daughter Trisha and I had lived there for some time, and unlike Karen's carbon copy son, Trisha actually had manners and ambitions that didn't involve throwing fits in public. As it happened, Trisha shared a class with Karen's son, Tyler, a genuinely sweet kid, just unlucky enough to be raised by a walking storm system. Prom season rolled around, and Tyler, hopeful as ever, asked Trisha to go with him. But she'd already committed to someone else weeks earlier, so she turned him down as kindly as she could. It was ordinary teenage stuff, the kind of thing any reasonable parent would let go without a second thought. Not Karen, though. That woman treated the word no like a personal insult to her entire family line. So when Tyler came home and casually mentioned it, Karen apparently decided it was grounds for war. Before long, she was stomping through the streets like a furious giant in yoga pants, hunting for someone to blame. And of course, that someone ended up being my front door. Trisha had no idea any of this was building. She was buried in exam prep while I was busy pretending not to notice the storm gathering over Karen's bleached hair. I should have known better. Storms like that always find a crack to slip through. Everything changed the moment Karen caught wind of Tyler's rejection. It was as if someone had lit a fuse under her pride, and the blast rattled the whole block. The next morning she showed up at my door, pounding on it so hard the doorbell practically gave up. The second I opened it, she launched into a full-blown tirade about how my daughter had humiliated her son. I stood there, groggy and baffled, trying to figure out why a grown woman was this invested in a high school dance. I calmly asked her why she was inserting herself into something that wasn't hers to control. Instead of a rational answer, she puffed up and warned that she'd make sure both Trisha and I regretted it. Said it with the seriousness of someone declaring war on a nation. I already knew she was extra, but this was a whole new tier of absurd. From that point on, the fines poured in like junk mail after signing up for a shady site. A fine for grass a quarter-inch too long. A fine for my trash bin sitting too close to the curb. She even fined me over a single leaf she swore had drifted from my yard into hers. Pettiness had officially become her sport. Then she escalated, showing up again to demand that Trisha never talk to Tyler, never walk near him, never so much as exist in his general direction. I tried to reason with her, explaining that teenagers move past these things fast, and none of this needed to be a big deal. But she wasn't listening. Every word out of my mouth got twisted into something offensive, like she was molding reality out of pure delusion. I could see the weight of it settling on Trisha. She put on a brave face, but she started avoiding Karen's house, avoiding walking alone, avoiding anything that might set Karen off again. Watching her shrink herself to dodge someone else's madness broke my heart. That's when it hit me. This was spiraling out of control fast, and if I didn't step in, Karen was going to drag the whole neighborhood down with her. I wanted to handle it carefully. Not just to keep my own sanity intact, but to show Trisha how to face conflict without becoming part of it. So one evening, I sat her down and suggested something I genuinely believed would smooth things over. I told her to go to Karen's house, apologize sincerely, and explain there'd been no disrespect intended. Maybe, I thought, if Karen saw genuine kindness, she'd finally find a shred of common sense. Trisha, gentle as always, agreed right away. Had I known what was about to happen, I never would have let her go by herself. She walked over confidently, rehearsing her words, with no idea she was walking straight into the den of a woman who'd lost touch with basic decency long ago. She knocked softly, and when the door swung open, Karen stood there wearing her usual scowl, like she'd been interrupted mid-complaint. Trisha greeted her respectfully and started to explain, but Karen didn't even let her finish a full sentence before her hand shot out and struck her so hard it sounded like a gunshot cracking through the quiet street. My daughter dropped to the ground, dazed, clutching her face in shock. She tried to push herself up, but before she could steady herself, Karen hit her again. Harder, like she'd rehearsed this exact moment. "I told your father I never want you near my son again," she spat, her voice like shattered glass. Then, as if the violence wasn't enough, she pulled out her phone and started filming Trisha, aiming the camera at her like she was capturing footage of some dangerous creature. Across the street, James, my quiet, even-tempered neighbor, witnessed the whole thing. He bolted over so fast he nearly stumbled down his own front steps, ripped the phone out of Karen's grip, and carefully helped Trisha to her feet, steering her away from the scene. By the time he brought her into my living room, she was trembling, her cheeks swollen, mascara running down her face in streaks. She could barely get the words out, but every fragment she managed to speak sent my blood pressure through the roof. Hearing what happened felt like something inside me had been flipped on. Karen had crossed the last line there was, torn it out of the ground, and burned it to ash. The moment I saw Trisha's face, red, swollen, trembling, something in me went cold and steady. No screaming, no panic. I just picked up my phone and started recording everything. Her shaking voice, the fingerprint marks bruising her skin, the tears she kept trying to wipe away, and James standing behind her, furious, laying out exactly what he'd witnessed. This time, Karen wasn't going to twist the story. I was building a case. Solid, undeniable proof. I called the police right away. When the officers walked in and saw Trisha's face, their expressions shifted immediately. James gave a full statement, describing both strikes and how Karen had filmed her afterward. The officers went straight to Karen's house. She tried to play innocent, but the moment they told her she was being detained, that confidence drained out of her instantly. She was arrested right there on the spot. The charges piled up: assault, battery, child endangerment, harassment, disorderly conduct, and invasion of privacy for filming a minor without consent. Since it involved multiple physical strikes, the officer noted the case could carry enhanced penalties, possibly even jail time. I called my lawyer the moment I got the chance. We filed a civil suit seeking compensation for medical costs, emotional damage, harassment, and years of Karen abusing her HOA position. He estimated she'd be looking at tens of thousands in damages, on top of legal costs and likely sanctions from the HOA board itself. Once investigators dug further, it became obvious she'd been misusing her authority for years, something the board could no longer sweep under the rug. Neighbors gathered on the street as the officers guided her into the back of the patrol car. Some recorded it, some murmured to each other, some just stood there shaking their heads. Trisha stood next to me, gripping my hand tightly, watching the woman who'd tried to terrify her finally face something real. Karen wasn't calling the shots anymore. Reality had finally caught up to her. The end. Do you think she got what she deserved? Let us know in the comments.